We're going to have our discussion right now for the first discussion. But before you jump in, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give sort of sum up from the two speakers. This is the conclusion that I hope I can draw from Mr. Djafaara's presentation. The first one is Indonesia's economic potential. GDP growth is on decline from 6.2 to 5.1 in Q4 2014, and the interest rate was increased by Bank of Indonesia since 2013. We're gonna find why is these measures were taken by Bank of Indonesia. Inflation was pretty high in 2013 compared with the figure in 2014, as we saw a fuel price hike during that time, but now the fuel price is declining. And then the banking industry resilience remain solid with the credit risk, liquidity risk, and market risk that are well mitigated, along with the support of a healthy capital base. That was 3 points that I could figure out from your presentation. Well, from Mr. Juoro, I've drawn several points. AEZ is a win-win proposition. Integrated economy within the regions is going to be our fundamental economy. And then AEZ, ASEAN Economic Community, will be about Indonesia in terms of the size of the economy and GDP as well, while AEZ will not be there without Indonesia. But we face a tremendous challenges, both positive and negative, within the advent of AEZ. The positive thing is, by all means, it's all about Indonesia because it's the biggest economy and GDP in the region, while the negative side is Indonesia will be viewed as a mere market target within the initiative. And the other point is, in terms of the way how the government prepare its people, other countries are ahead compared to Indonesia. Let's say Singapore or Malaysia compared to our own nation. And the challenges of ASEAN that we are facing are enhancing macroeconomics and financial stability, equitable growth, promoting competitiveness and innovation, and last but not least, improvement of the governance. Before I'd like to invite you to jump into the discussion, I'd like to ask to Mr. Djafaara, seeing this kind of economic development in Indonesia recently, our rupiah is deteriorating over the past few years. Are we ready for AEC and after, Mr. Djafaara?
Thank you. It's a very good question. I have to show the charts of why the Indonesia rupiah is weakening lately. But I think the chart can show that that the Indonesians, not only Indonesian, experience the weakening of its currency, but the other countries also facing the same problem, same thing. That the all countries now facing the US dollar, the strengthening of US dollars. Some countries is very happy with the strengthening of US dollars because it will improve their economic performance, like Juoro area, Japan. They purposely to weakening the currency, to have the country have a higher growth, to be more competitive. So they like to see their currencies weakening. And the other country also, like Korea, try to because Japan and China they also try to weaken the currency compared to dollars.
And what can we do to mitigate this decline?
First, that why the rupiah is weakening. External sides that US dollar is strengthened, but we cannot avoid it. Rupiah is weakening. Internal side of basic challenges. We see that our current account deficit starts since the last quarter of 2011, and this continued although it's getting better, it can contain the current account deficit, but still there. The current account deficit in 2000, start from 2014 is financed by the capital inflows. So the confidence of the global investors that Indonesia is very important. So we can maintain their good to Indonesia.
Okay.
That's the one thing that the government.
I'd like to discuss it more later on from the audience questions, but before that, please allow me to ask one question to Mr. Juoro. One of the biggest concerns is that, or let's say fears, that Indonesia will only be a mere market target for the initiatives of AEC and AFTA. What can we do to avoid that kind of, loopholes?
I always that study economics. I'm not the kind of like a followers of this kind of like a clearing market. I like very much this mass equilibrium thing to get theory. So looking kind of like more interaction. So I feel like when you look at Indonesia, from not outside Indonesia, it's in the interest of Malaysia, Singapore, to kind of like prosperous Indonesia. You could imagine if Indonesia only become a target of the market, or Indonesia could be like in turmoil. That's why they like very much, I think Dr. Rizal was like that too, Jokowi compared to Prabowo, because they were really scared if the Prabowo president. That's what I heard, because they're reminding into the kind of masa konfrontasi Malaysia. Singapore like that too. So that's kind of like one thing. So for us, why should we fear? There's a cooperative game. Although this is not kind of like the best equilibrium, but we can get the second best. But we usually choose the lowest equilibrium of all, if that is equilibrium, which is actually is not even equilibrium in my view. It's a lose-lose proposition. That's kind of like simple thing. If we fear with the foreign bank, the Malaysia thing, Singapore thing, we limit them 40%. Where capital come from? I said to you over and over again that actually capital from Singapore is also Indonesian. But they want to come to Indonesia, put it there because it's first they get kind of like, yes, they're coming to Indonesia anyway. It's not through the kind of like their own name, but under the kind of like a proxy. But Indonesia is always keep kind of like changing in terms of regulation. So they say that that's the things about the discussions about pemutihan, sunset policy of tax. When we talk about this kind of like people who deviate the tax, tax in avoidance, they will say, if I kind of like acknowledge, okay, so I accepted the sunset policy, so then I acknowledge I don't pay tax properly, now I would like to tax properly. So for the current administration, you're okay. But if the administration is changing, not even like the president will change, say kind of like the minister of finance change, then they kind of like prosecuted thing. So there is no, that's why I said kind of like the institution is really a lot matter. So that's what actually we come into lose-lose propositions, or we kind of like fear like what you say. What we kind of like overcome this fear, to me, is just kind of like we're in the open kind of like society now. Indonesia or kind of like a world of Asia. A cooperative is the best way to do. So we're the Bank Indonesia, the OJK or everywhere. Okay, you Malaysia, you Singapore, everybody, foreigners who come to Indonesia, after all, we're a foreign entity, right? So we would kind of say now is that you have to do this. So put it in terms of the bank, for instance, now is that it's actually like what I said, only 30% of credit to GDP. But now even BI on the OJK, they don't have the same thing, the same policy in terms of branchless banking. Because BI is more kind of concentrated, we call it Buku 4, which is Bank Mandiri, BNI, BRI, and BCA.
Four main banks in Indonesia.
Yes, for branchless, they are not low to Buku 3. I agree with that. Because Buku 3, if we look that way, it's just kind of like dominated by Malaysia and Singapore. But they're kind of like do everything. But branchless is new thing because this is using the handphone technology, and telecom and agent. So there's also the social repercussion and there's a fraud and so on. But OJK allowing all the banks to participate. So if this kind of like problem happen, then who is responsible? BI said you OJK, and then OJK, no, you should BI should give kind of like letter of last resort, kind of liquidity. So that's kind of like fear. That's kind of like what is this a negative kind of like it's actually harmed, not only harmed us, but also discourage us to develop. So how to do that? We are open society. We kind of like what is this a more cooperative strategy. Then after all, we are sovereign country. So then kind of like you come to Indonesia, but this is the requirements. They still get highest return compared to when they have to invest outside Indonesia. By that one, so we can get to kind of like what I said over and over again. There is a win-win.
Okay, so it can be win-win solution. It can be lose and lose solution.
Yes.
But I'm really interested with your notion about that. You know, one of the main obstacles for advancing our economy is the elites' habits and elites' attitudes within our nation. Are we getting there to advancing our economy if these elites get, you know, like fighting to each other?
I don't think so. How wasted of kind of like wasted of top human resource that we have. Like what I said, if kind of like Minister of Transportation now is John would be the economist. I think Bambang Susanto, Vice President is Djafaara. Not the president yet, unless you have Japanese state in government. So it's kind of wasted resources. And then you could see that I'm talking about just professional. You could imagine how I can politics. That's what I don't see. People, right? Everybody is at the kind of like bringing up the people. So that's what I think is kind of like really key thing. There's a lot of our effort, whether it's kind of like in a micro, in a macro policy. Politics is always that way. It's instead of the accumulated human capital, we wasted it. You know, it's like in my classmates. Every time I go to Hamburg or to, not much here, but to Madrid, to Seattle, that's my classmate from days in Bandung, ITB, they are there. It's they good, they're working with the Boeing, they're going with the CASA, they're going with the Airbus. But when I talk to our fellow economists, so what do you mean? Are you going to kind of like continue your boss kind of like develop this kind of like useless and very costly airplane? Okay, like we don't talk about airplane industry, but I'm just talking about while our neighbors they accumulated our capital, human capital, of course physical capital, we are wasted very much.
We're losing our best brains.
That's what I still haven't seen yet. You know, I see now. Rizal would say about the quality of this kind of like policymakers now later on. So it was kind of like detail there. That's kind of like indications there. So that's what I kind of like scare most with this our elite, because we cannot rely our institution yet. If we talk about institution, look at now, you know, kind of like a KPK. No matter what, is that we have to kind of like survive the institution. But then, joking now, it's kind of, you know, Faisal will kind of like talk more about this thing, and I have to kind of like Israeli research persons on that. So it's kind of like, again, really wasted. No matter what Abraham Samad is kind of like doing any facilitating this pretty woman, it's a personal thing. But don't criminalize the institution. So then we kind of like go, that's what really makes me sad. So then look now, is there kind of like, when we talk about this thing, is there a top graduate from Faculty of Law, UI, UGM, going to Minister of Justice, going to the Attorney General? No way. They're going into the private law firm. So that's what kind of like bothering me a lot. I'm not worried about this kind of like Singapore, I'm not worried about Thailand, but I worry much about our elite and the way how kind of like we structure and developing our institutions. That's what makes me kind of worried.
Right, I'd like to open up a discussion from the floor. If you please identify yourself with the purple sweater, please. I'd like to have 3 questions for right now. The first one is over there, the second one, and I prefer a lady for this time, over there. Yeah.
Thank you, Pak Djafaara and Pak Rizal Djafaara and Pak Umar for the wonderful presentations. Two questions. First of all, I'm struggling to understand what will be different from the 1st of January 2016 than from what is happening now. For example, in the banking sector, will there be further liberalization in the banking sector? For example, will it solve the reciprocity issue that Indonesian banks allegedly face when trying to go into Malaysia, for example? So that's one point. Because on one hand, in Indonesia, we're seeing signs of further restrictions for foreign banks. But in the Philippines, it's the opposite, I think. They would like to further liberalize the banking sector for foreign banks. So that's one point. Secondly, perhaps more for Pak Umar, you talk about win-win, that ACE is a win-win thing. Presumably, you're talking the aggregate here, but do you foresee any sectors where Indonesia will lose out, for example? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can just answer it straight away. So the first question for Mr. Djafaara. Oh, right, okay. So the second one, please.
Thank you, good morning. My name is Landry. I'm a diplomat, but currently I'm undertaking my doctoral degree at Oxford University. And Pak Umar Juoro, I'm very struck with your presentations about this losing of human capital. It seems to me that engineers in Indonesia prefer to build walls instead of bridges. And I think we should have Pak Bambang Susantono, who would love to build bridges, in the transportation sectors. I think that would be more wonderful. But my question to you is about the mentality of this. I should refer to Pak Rizal Ramli's always mentioned about this feudalism of politics and economics. It seems to me, because you love game theory, and in the game theory, asymmetric information will always be there for as long as people don't share information, don't do networking. That's why I fully agree with the importance of institutions. But given the circumstances that you've mentioned, especially among the elites, it seems to me that you're posing a very bleak situation for us, given the elites' attitudes, just like Rory mentioned. So what can we, the non-elites, can do? And
you're elites too.
and especially with with these forces of egalitarianism, and in the global stage, but despite all the callings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Andre. And the first one, sorry, Bapak Alfandi. And for the third question, please.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Rizal Djafaara and Mr. Umar Juoro for a very enlightening talk and seminar. I'm Maria Sarita. I'm doing my bachelor degree in Monash University. I'm currently on student exchange program here at Leeds, and I really agree with what Mr. Umar Juoro have mentioned, that human capital is very important, and we need to make sure that the human capital in Indonesia have that mentality to actually do what best for the rest of Indonesian society. So my question is, Indonesian economy without corruption, is it possible, and what should Indonesia do? And my second question would be, do you agree, no matter who leads, the economy will continue to grow because of sheer large consumption power? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mas Alfandi, Mas Andre, and Maria for the questions. I would like to start off with the first question is about the banking liberalization in Indonesia. Mr. Djafaara.
Yeah, regarding the first question, the banking organizations in ASEAN Economic Community, one of these way we set up the Asian Community to have a real local goods and services. But for the capital, we say freer capital flows, because we acknowledge that our capital flows from the Asian country already in the advanced stages. Indonesia even freer than the other Asian countries. So we talked about we discussing the capital, how to increase cooperation among the Asian countries in the banking sectors. We have the Asian banking initiative. Then the discussions that it's very difficult to get agreements. So instead, we have a common platform for all the countries. Now we have a bilateral agreement. So then in 2016, there will be no changes in the cooperation between now and only 2016. So we still Indonesia, because we are freer than the other Asian countries. So why the issue of reciprocal reciprocity is become hot issues in Indonesia, because we open to the other Asian countries, but our banks find difficult to open their business in other Asian countries. But also we should note that the markets in Indonesia is very big. Even the incentives for our domestic banks to have business outside Indonesia is less compared to the other banks in Asian countries. They want to go to Indonesia because they know Indonesia is big. But for the Indonesian banks, incentive is a little bit less than the other Asian banks, because they can see still that a lot of opportunity in Indonesian markets. So why the Indonesia OJK is try to persuade them. They need to start to open their business in Asian countries. Even in 2013, I think, Ambassador, because now the issue of the money will be closed in UK, because the head office in Jakarta thinks that the European is a declining market, so why they maintain the business here, the futures in the ASEAN, the Chinese markets. But because the ambassador and all the from OJK and the Indonesia convinced the board of directors of they need to maintain it, because once they close their operations here, they cannot open again. So it's incentive for our banks to go have business outside the Spanish.
I hope that answers, Mas Alfandi. But Mr. Djafaara, will we see in the next 5 or 10 years that many Indonesian banks will be on the ASEAN countries such as Malaysia or Singapore? Because we know that there are a lot of Indonesian people there.
Yeah, that's a spirit of Chinese community. They're still focusing on domestic markets. So we will see that it depends how they see it. They start with their business. At least they have started to Malaysia and Singapore, because a lot of Indonesians there. So they have to start the Indonesians with Singapore and Malaysia. But for the other regions in ASEAN, I still have doubt that they will have a strong incentive to open
So I think that we must avoid is that Indonesia will only be a mandatory market for other countries investing their banking industry in Indonesia, right?
Yeah, I think that's. I don't think it's also we have to worry about the Indonesians. American is a mother for the other world. But Americans can have a good economy, and we can, the people of America enjoy the other nations investing in that way.
Okay.
So that, it's also opportunity, because a lot of capital comes when not only the product, but also the production base. And they open the business in Indonesia, they bring the difference.
I'd like to move on to Mr. Juoro about the question from Mas Andreas. We are sick of our elites' attitude and habit, aren't we?
Yeah.
What can the non-elites, particularly, average Indonesian like I am and others
You are elite, Indonesia is, in your level is what, 2%? 3%? You are very,
then what can non-elites do to contribute to advance our growth and civilization?
First is I would like to focus. I'm not kind of like people is everywhere, right? We have to kind of like get the fact, given the fact that our education for common education is low. That's why Pak Rizal will kind of talk about why people vote for Jokowi instead of Prabowo, for instance. But that's given. You know what? Elite is we get the facility. You are elite. You kind of like just 2% of the 2014 millions Indonesia. My concerns there. In one side, it should be bleak, but on the other side, I can be kind of like positive too. That's why we never given up. But just to convince of the elites, again, my faculty is a game theory. Because the problem we're kind of like confronted into the elite. After that, they deviate. Instead of kind of like concerned with that strategy. What's the point I kind of like work with Rizal, Djafaara, Umar, Juoro, Faisal, Basri, Bambang Susantono? If I can go deviate, to Jokowi, I can be minister. You're not. Yeah. So it's that's the biggest problem that we face. I'm not concerned about the quality of the capacity, the capability of the elite. What I don't have kind of like a solutions now is can we kind of like overcome these deviations, this kind of like lose-lose strategy. And then what the other is kind of like, it's the worst of all, it's stabbing. Still, I don't. Is that the cultural? Yeah, cultural is too big thing, right? We talk about culture, everything is explained. But I'm just thinking about that way. That's what I don't see in Malaysia. In Malaysia, it's like, I said it, I'm a Maybank for this. So Maybank is selected 3 CEO. That's the top, the best brain the Malaysia have in the corporate, because the 3 CEO is one from Inter Bank, one is from Maybank itself, is a track higher career there. The third one is from the telecom. And out of the 3 who get selected as CEO of Maybank, Maybank is the largest bank, number 4 in ASEAN. It's not somebody who comes from the Maybank. It's coming from used to be Kasana. So the other 2, of course, they upset. But you know what? The last one is now is the CEO of CIMB. And the third one is now is CEO of LHB, which is kind of like smaller number 3 bank. So then what they do, you cannot be a Maybank any longer. Just like in the US, you lost in the GE, you can be at the top one of the company in the US. So overall, the accumulations of the capital, human capital, is enlarged. But in Indonesia, I remember at that time, when after Habibie, Umar, never thought of Habibie, come on, we're professional, And now is that, I just kind of like, is that, I'm not the kind of like what I observe politics too. Is that true? I asked my friend, is that true that they who close to SBY is now, and you know, you could see now in the cabinet and kind of like top positions.
So this is the problem that we're facing. People who are close to the elites, they got the chance.
No, I'm saying we're all of us elite. But the way we kind of like manage our human capital, the way we kind of like choose strategy, instead of be consistent with strategy to get this kind of like a cooperative, which is the result win-win. in the outcome, we choose the other way. We choose the strategy is that we deviating. Because by deviating, turn out personally, I myself or you yourself get the better outcome. But when you look overall of our elite or our country is actually losing. Because then I kick you out, you don't longer have any positions. I'm going on now. But overall, our institution is less. That's not happening in Singapore. That's not happening in Malaysia. I can be compete with you. You're going to be a minister, but after that you can go to the corporate sector. But in Indonesia, if I lose, then I kind of like gang up upon you. I create my own party. I cannot kind of like create my own company, which is less small company, less profitable, less votes, and so on and so on. That's what I mean. The hardest part is that I still not be kind of like able to come into the model or kind of like go into the win-win. Because again, in Indonesia, because the opportunity is so huge, so every time we kind of like to be consistent, you deviate.
Okay.
That's kind of like the biggest one. And I was kind of like looking into siapa yang pertama tadi mengenai
Alfandi, Mr. Alfandi.
Pak Fandi. When you look in what is this Philippines? I live in Philippines for 1.5 years. When I was there, the president was Aquino. It's a mess like Indonesia. And they look down in Indonesia. If every time we go to the mall, my classmates said, Umar, do you have this kind of like mall in Indonesia? Because they don't look Indonesia. What they look is US. When you talk Chicago, when you talk San Francisco, they know in detail about that. And you know these people, my classmates, they go to Stanford, my professor graduate from Harvard, but nice. In terms of elite, they just juggling each other very badly during Aquino time. Military like that too. The economy is called the sick of Asia. Now is the sun is coming. Right? It's Benigno Aquino. That's why I kind of like saying elite is a lot matter for a country that kind of like, especially when the institution is weak. Benigno Aquino is simple. Most of the time it's just kind of like organizing around. I don't know which part. Lucas could say his girlfriend now. And Koreans. But what he doesn't do compared to other Filipino is that he doesn't corrupt. Because what's the point? I'm a bachelor. I'm rich enough. That's changed drastically. Now you talk about inflation, it's only 2-3%. You're talking about policy rate, it's 4-5%. We still inflation is around 6-7%. Our rate is still kind of like 6-7%. So just kind of like the behavior of this super elite, the president changed compared to Makapagal Arroyo is changed too. And then now they become realistic. If we kind of like too nationalistic, then where capital would come from? Unlike Indonesia, which Indonesia is really rich when they come into the kind of like Singapore and Hong Kong. Philippines, they mainly get from the remittance. That's what kind of really save capital account. So it's actually, they really kind of like open to the foreign investment. But at the same time, they kind of like improve this kind of like a thing. They're more kind of like natural disaster than us. So when I talk about maritime, we don't know about maritime now. Yes, Pak Bambang will kind of like say, are we committed with MP3AE? I think no, we are not committed any longer. Di zamannya Pak SBY, sekarang maritim. I still don't know. In the Philippines, now under Aquino is hopefully will continue. So the focus is what infrastructure that really distributing this kind of like a food. So then inflation will kind of go down significantly. So it's just kind of like by that simple thing, and by kind of like using a rational, and then make elite become a cooperative under the Benigno Aquino. A lot. Indonesia is not investment grade yet. Philippines is investment grade already.
Not the SME.
Just one notch below the Philippines. Still. So Philippines, when you see, no, cannot be. It's all the way around. So this is kind of like the thing that I would kind of like just strengthening the position with me and kind of like the elite. I'm not kind of looking really bleak because we can change your elite. Tell us to tell it. How can we work together? That's kind of like the thing that we kind of like improve a lot of.
Okay, I hope it helps to answer the question from Andre. And we're going to the third question. Is Indonesia without corruption is not Indonesia? That's the first question. The second question is, the economy will grow because of a very strong domestic consumption regardless whoever lead our country. Is that true?
What's the last one?
Regardless whoever lead our country.
Indonesia economy growth. I think yes. So Indonesia is a 5% growth is given. The way I look at it is at least in the kind of like coming into the next decade.
But can we only rely on strong domestic consumption without making ourselves more productive?
And then after that, it's become a developed economy. We are a developed country. We talk about productivity. Just you talking about the consumption. Look at here, Malaysia, Thailand. Malaysia is indebted now because debt household to GDP is about 100%. You know, debt to GDP of household in Indonesia is about 20, at most is 25%. We are not household indebted. So just kind of like you keep the consumptions going into the kind of like 4-5%, and then infrastructure not saying that it's successful or going. It's kind of like facilitating project investment, and then it's kind of like investment from the government. Not in the level of the way that the Malaysian government do or kind of like Thailand government do. 5% is a given in the next decade. But the question is that after that, what would be? The 1998 is a very particular thing because at the time is that the politics and the economic at the same time are kind of like experiencing a crisis. And then you know what? That's what I said to kind of like, I'm in a BI, it's not part of the BI in the supervisory board. What really the most difficult thing in Indonesia is not about systemic as such. Now there's a lot of improvement in terms of capital, in terms of risk management, like Pak Rizal said, in terms of institutions, as far as the bank is concerned. But when it comes to the behavior, especially into the debtor, I don't see this kind of like change much, especially with the shock. So the behavior, and in the corporate like that too. In Malaysia, you kind of like the non-performing loan is structured, but 20 years, consequently about 20 years. In Indonesia, the elite in the corporate, they're ready to bankrupt the company. They default. Anyway, I cannot be a London, coming to London because I defaulted to Barclays, for instance, or to any kind of like involvement bank. But after that, the fund manager will change anyway. This is young people, they will kind of like still buy my bond. So I defaulted it. I kind of like set up the SPV. Then I sell a bond again. That's another difficulties that you could see that again for 5% is okay. But is that the way for us to be developed economy? I don't think so.
Okay.
Because after all, you have to talk about outside consumption, outside capital. It is not our factor productivity. It is not to be the human resource and technology.
I'd like to pass on the first question of Maria about Indonesia is not Indonesia without corruption, given the fact that, according to Mr. Juoro, the Bank of Indonesia is one of the institutions that have, a lot of people in jail because of the KDK. Do you think that it's impossible for us to get rid of corruption?
I think it's difficult, but I think we progress it. We cannot eliminate all, but we make progress. Although in recent days we are seeing very discouraging development.
I'd like to see from the Bank of Indonesia perspective, because the Minister of Finance has made some measures to prevent their employees to corrupt. Then what Bank of Indonesia has done?
Bank Indonesia and profit halal.
So they go to jail, but not corruption.
Yeah.
Some of Bank of Indonesia persist. Okay.
But it's more than gratification. Yeah. That's what the problem of and the policy. Central is a policy maker.
So in Indonesia, policy is making to go to jail.
It's a crime.
Not only corruption.
The problem of this criminalization of policies, when Indonesia is another crisis, there will be nobody to take that place. And it's what the gospel. That's the worry for us. Because if you take this burden for it, you need to take the decisions. But if you don't take the decisions, all the Indonesia will burn. Now we also have two serious situations involving the banking sector, financial OJK, both can be
OJK's Money Service Authority.
Financial
Service.
Supervisory.
Okay.
So they don't I don't think they want to take this after. But the Minister of Finance already said that they will not make decisions if the Bank Indonesia and OJK say this is the crisis. So now you can see the Minister of Finance already make it clear that the decisions who said the financial crisis or the Indonesia will face financial crisis will be decided by OJK and Indonesia. They don't want to say because they are pointing to this. No, if that happens, the financial crisis happens. I don't think that's also Bank Indonesia and OJK will say because later on after the crisis can be resolved, there is a cost, and then the other will sue because the cost is too high.
Okay.
And then
Yeah, this is the thing. I always said to kind of like a BPK and in some extent KPK too. So if you kind of like do things, this is what they do is a good thing, the KPK. But if you kind of just arrested people, put in jail, like in Bank Indonesia, for instance, just because the regulations say that it's actually tanggung jawab bersama. It's especially in the bank, it's tanggung renteng. You're a director, although you are not a corrupt, or you are do a fraud, you put the go to jail too, tanggung jawab bersama. So then it's really
shared
subtle.
responsibility.
Look at the talk with the Bank Indonesia. Somebody like who's in jail now is kind of like Pak Sahrul Sabri. Regardless whatever he did, kind of like it's not really corrupt. Because at that time was a chassis in the case of Bank. And then Aslim Tajudin, and just name it. Then it's kind of like going to this kind of like Pak Budiono, regardless we don't like Pak Budiono, it's okay. But somebody like him, because of Bank Sentral is coming into jail, then it's kind of like what's really going on? Well, kind of like a real corruptor is going on. Because the way, of course with all the due respect, the way we work in a KPK and also the audit, Supreme Audit Body, is just the policeman way to do things. Sometimes it's kind of like, the policemen in Indonesia, like they hide behind the tree. So when we kind of like passing by the red light, so they can, yeah, I got you. And then
We violate the traffic light and then they just
and transactions are happening.
trap us.
So no matter what, for many kind of like Indonesian officials who go into jail and politicians, I don't think it's kind of like anti-corruption thing, or it's kind of like country is happening. So I'm not saying kind of like Malaysia is better one of the things in Singapore, but the way that they do things is different. It's kind of like, except for the cases different is unbelievable. I just give an example in ASEAN and the things that I know very much. In Malaysia, it's just kind of like the policy makers. No matter they found it's kind of like any kind of like mistake that they did in the 5 to 10 years. Okay, like this is the past. We go forward. And my plan is different because you want like really rock to the establishment of UMNO. So in Singapore, you know they do, right? So I give you, your minister, I pay you at least equal to the CEO of Temasek or CEO of HSBC, just name it. So they always get the top grade. In Indonesia, when the World Bank asked economists and so on talking about this kind of like, can we pay Indonesia's official higher? Of course we can. But how much they are going to pay? Because their take-home pay, including this kind of like cipratan, kickback, and so on, is much bigger. So you could see now is that reckoning the good of police. You add it up together, how many scholarships that they could give to Indonesian students to UK? It's more than Petronas.
The fact that corruption is done because of two, corruption by need and corruption by greed. So however high you give the salary to the elites or to the executive, then it will not prevent them from corrupting.
That's right, because this is kind of like the existing thing. But I don't say we don't do it. We should do what kind of like appropriate thing to do. It's kind of like salary. You're not really kind of like, you're joking. You pay kind of like ministers 19 million. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Because now is the CEO of bank. You couldn't get the CEO of kind of like the top 20 bank if you pay them only what is this 100 juta, 10,000 US dollars per month net. You cannot. The market is above 200 million groups. So you pay minister 19 million. Then we have to do that. Then one way for us to kind of like get operations, the elite is becoming kind of, oh, we are paid enough now. So now kind of like, let's work together to kind of like create this kind of like a culture. Then hopefully the institutions will kind of like develop. And then, like what I said, every time I talk to BPK part, can you do it just like we're in the corporate? In the corporate is every time we go into the project, so we call the top kind of like auditor or become a consultant, whether it's NER or kind of like other KPMG. Are we violating the regulations? Is this kind of like violating our kind of like articles of association? They will consult us before we move. But in Indonesia, when I said to the BPK, oh, we cannot do that because we are auditor body. Auditor is post facto. If you do that, then more and more our kind of like the top brain is going to jail. So then the other aspect is that we are not really engaged, right? Especially when you are in a corporate and then still the BUMN or you are the minister. I don't want to deal with the DPR, karena itu corrupt. What happened? I just still don't understand why Ruby and Dini, if they kind of like play with the crack putih, it's not crack putih corruption. You get the money from the business, put in the shoebox, and give it to Sultan Batugana as the politician. It's a beer man.
White collar corruption.
No, this is not. This is a primitive corruption. Shoebox, and give it to the politician. I said engage the politician. Which is, after all, politics is about distributions, right? It's not about growth. Okay, you can facilitate this, but we're not going forward. Let's make it open, become policy. I scratch your back, I scratch my back, but it's accountable. But in Indonesia, it's difficult. BPK, KPK, dia lebih suka menangkap di belakang. So they like to catch people, instead of kind of like creating the culture with step by step. So if we do like that, among us, the elite, that's kind of like pre-engage, because after all, game theory is about engagement. If you don't engage, then we cannot create the kind of like elite culture. You do bad, I do bad. The time I engage to you, this is the problem that I do. It's like, you know, when they want to be selected as deputy governor, of course the politician said, deputy governor, you have to pay us what, 200 million, they said, each of us. So that's corruption again. But if they engage, after all the public policy, where do I get money come from? I'm a minister. So I cannot do a corruption. But if we cannot like talk about the better of the country, we can talk about policy. So in that way, salary improvement, engagement, and then kind of like proper doing thing and audit, kind of like instead of kind of like cat on the back, there's kind of like preventions with kind of like moving together. That's the way that we should take actually to kind of like against corruption.
We still have 20 minutes left, so I'd like to invite another questions from the floor. Over there, gentleman over there, and gentleman over there. And I need a lady for the next question, if there's any. So, Mas with black suit first, please.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. Rizal, Djafaara, and Umar, Juoro, very inspiring talks. Thank you. My name is Rahmat. I'm from Oxford University. I'm doing DPhil, same as my fellow colleague, Mas Landry. I also one of a few remnants of electrical engineers from ITB that stuck in engineering, Pak.
That's good. You stay there, don't
Yeah,
go
you
out.
can rest assured there is still people like me who still study engineering for doctor. Okay, so I'm really interested in your ideas about the human capital strategy. So I'd like to hear your opinion about the national guidelines of human capital development. Because I think if we want to make a strategic contribution in the long term, we couldn't constrain the guideline for just one period. So let's say you said that previously we had MP3EI, and now we have Nawacita, if I remember correctly. So it has a different focus, but we always have different focus on different government. We don't have long-term national guidelines for the focus of, especially in my concern as an engineer, especially in industry. How would we utilize our brightest minds into this strategy of industry? Because from what I know, LPDP, beasiswa LPDP has now more than 2,000 awardees. So in 2017, 2 years from now, there will be 2,000 graduates. 500 among them is doctor. We will have 500 doctors, and I can say that we have no idea what would we contribute exactly to Indonesia, because there are no visible, clear and concise national guidelines that we can see. Even we have weaponized, but we never understand what really exactly that the focus of our industry, focus of our human capital development. What should we study actually? What should we contribute after we graduate? We never have a clear, concise answer for that. So I'd like to hear your opinion about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmad, for the question. And the second question is gentleman over there.
Terima kasih. Saya nanya ke Indonesia aja ya. Terang itu tadi beberapa istilah soalnya nanti tidak clear. Minta tolong nanti moderator agak mengulang beberapa audiens yang tidak paham Indonesia. Saya Zaid, student di sini tadi. Ini konteksnya kan konteks globalisasi dan bank, gitu ya, bukan corruption sebenarnya barangkali. Terus tadi Mas Umar bilang capital outflow, gitu ya. Nah, globalisasi dan perang mata uang dan lain-lain itu memang terjadi. Nah, yang saya ingin sebenarnya mendapat penjelasan lebih terang dari Mas Umar terutama, karena di SIDES kan lama ya, dan pemikiran ekonomi Islamnya harusnya kental di sana ya. Jadi apa intervensi yang bisa dibuat dari bank dalam konteks globalisasi? Kalau Maybank dan perang-perang ekonomi global mata uang dan lain-lain saya pikir oke. Ini terkait juga dengan capital outflow tadi. Saya membayangkan misalnya dari Bank Indonesia kan, kalau saya tidak salah mungkin kalau klarifikasi itu juga punya authority untuk mengatur bank-bank yang lain gitu. Saya membayangkan model-model Grameen Bank itu bisa dijadikan satu kebijakan nasional diintervensi oleh Bank Indonesia, atau misalnya bank pertanian atau bank yang lain, karena yang paling banyak nanti di lapangan berantemnya itu kan petani misalnya, atau nelayan gitu. Nah, capital outflow tadi itu ya bisa diarahkan ke sana. Soalnya posisinya strategis sekali. Bank Indonesia, apalagi Mas Umar, kalau saya tidak salah, ketua ini ya, ketua badan pengawas kalau saya tidak salah ya. Nah, itu sebetulnya strategi. Saya pikir gagasan atau keluhan-keluhan yang dibilang tadi mengenai capital outflow, saya pikir jangan dikeluhkan. Di apa itu? Apa namanya? Dimasukkan dalam kebijakan yang formal. Gitu. Saya pikir itu yang lebih kita tunggu daripada sekedar mengeluhkan adanya apa ya? Ya di pesta begini sudah, itu memang karakter kita ya, tidak apa-apa. Tapi ketika dalam posisi strategi seperti sekarang, baiknya ada kebijakan strategis yang saya pikir di sini sudah banyak sekali dielaborasi gagasan-gagasan seperti itu. Saya pikir model-model ekonomi kerakyatan yang dulu dikembangkan, misalnya Bang Yusman dengan teknologi tepat gunanya dulu banyak sekali dikembangkan di Bandung. Saya pikir itu. Jadi pertanyaan straight to the point, intervensi apa dari Bank Indonesia supaya jangan tumbang di lapangan? Makanya.
So I can draw two main points from Azaid. What intervention can be made by Bank of Indonesia in the sense of globalization, and capital outflow should be regulated in a formal manner. It should not be complained about. The third question, please, lady over there.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Aida from University of Birmingham. I'm doing graduate studies in political science. So I have a very technical question, actually, not like the others. So my first question is, from the presentations I got to see, two of the biggest bank in Indonesia was Rizal Bank. It's not an investment bank, and I was wondering why the investment, like the focus for investment bank, like PBS or Mitsubishi Tokyo or something like that, it's not like growing in Indonesia, like for our local bank. And the second question is about in capital trap. So you are, Mr. Umar, talking about the capital trap was facing Malaysia now. I think Indonesia will face the same problem in the future because we are going to facing the middle income trap. So how we can get out from that? Because Malaysia doing like investment to Indonesia and so on, but what we can do to face the middle income trap?
All right, thank you for the questions from the three questioners. I'd like to go for the first question from Mas Ahmad, an engineer from Oxford University, taking PhD. It's about the guidelines and roadmap as to how to make, human capital development more concrete and concise. Mr. Juoro, have you had any thought?
Yeah, what I see is first, of course, in kind of like what you're doing now, it's kind of like scholarship. We should kind of like stop again, no matter what. So it's we are elites. We kind of like only good there because you will be in a kind of like a positions definitely, but usually if your position in the top, you kind of like rejected the other. That's what the elite now. Hopefully, you will change that in our generations of this kind of like a bad thing. So. Then the second one is that it's a cynical actually. If you yourself personally, you don't worry, you don't get the job in Indonesia, Singapore and Malaysia, especially you from ITB and Oxford, they love you to pay whatever you believe me. We really sad actually. I have like kind of like my relatives and my friends, top PhD, optoelectronic. They come to me, masa saya di lapang diperlakukan seperti ini. Menurut Anda kalau saya ke Malaysia, it's your choice. So this is Malaysia,
So people tend to move out to another country
yeah,
because they feel more appreciated there.
That's what. This is what ASEAN economic. It's by intention, by the kind of like the designer, especially from other country, Malaysia. They open mobility for the skilled workers. Just like all of you. This is kind of like cynical in a way, but you can get any job that you want in a kind of like region. So really, you kind of like graduate from UK. So it's that's what happened, like what I said. But the difficult answer is how to be consistent in Indonesia. That's really difficult. But you could see that start with the kind of like micro chain portfolio. Like a Mandiri I think they're doing a good job in terms of like human resource. Although you may kind of like criticize back because the CEO is a graduate from Rizal department, from physics department. So his thesis and my thesis same, it's a nuclear physics like you do. So you're responsible, not me. So Budi Sadikin. So they groom the Indonesians very well. And when they kind of like was not really good in the CFO, so they get the CFO from that Malaysia or something, right? Not a director, but that's kind of like a proxy to the director. So that's what I said is, in the case of Mandiri, the human resource development win-win, it worked in that level. Then when you look at like in the government level, I think it's a BI is still kind of like the best institution. Ministry of Finance is still the best. But if you kind of like related to ETB, Pak Faisal will kind of like Faisal will talk a lot because he's now doing the reformations in the Ministry of Energy. I think it's really problematic there. Because ETB graduate, they're really kind of like sad now because they're beaten by STAN graduate. If you're beaten by UI, it's okay, now it's by STAN. That's a really funny thing there. So in the ministry like that, that's why kind of like I'm in favor, because I believe that if this kind of like the minister will be paid, say kind of like we still be able to pay 40 million or 50 million. I believe they will kind of like get any, even the politicians or political party force them to do corruptions, they will say, I'm happy enough with 40 million a month. So it's like that. By the way, BI is doing like that, because I'm supervisory board. So if you kind of like economic, BI is the best place to do. You don't have to do corruptions. Even like what Rizal said, it's nothing to do with corruptions. There is a policy which is bad input actually. So what happened that they end up in the prison. Ministry of Finance is there. And when they kind of like compare to the ministry, is they improve that. But the questions, can other ministry do that way? It's a kind of like a Ministry of Education do like that too, instead of talking about project. Ministry of Religion is not talking about project, but it's always just whispering me. This is kind of like when Ambassador said about the mental revolution. Wah, ini proyek lagi. If we don't look that way, so that's the kind of like a practical in the human capital. University, you know better than me. Now is they would kind of, but don't intervene. Right now is the kind of like what I heard from my colleague. Professor Al Jackman from URI, they said that they want to kind of like make same salary economic professor and kind of like a literature professor. Should be different, because I'm not saying that the quality is different, that's quality different, but to get the talents for a professor economics graduate to be a professor should be kind of like more. If university can do that and the government intervene to kind of like make it the salary less, then we lost the top talent to go there. The most difficult of all, if we look kind of like institution by institution, Parliament is always that way. In the UK like that too, right? That's kind of like a politician. But the worst of all, what I really kind of like worry is the Attorney General, Ministry of Justice, the police. I don't know. There's two kind of like used to be kind of like improved a little bit. The military now is a lot better. So I would kind of like more in terms of human capital. We go into the micro, and then we kind of like defending it. Well, kind of like developing it the way that we accumulate the human capital.
Okay. I'd like to go to the second question because we only have 10 minutes left before we have a break. From Masaid, about the capital outflow as well. So the first question before Mr. Juoro can add it up, I'd like to ask it to Mr. Djafaara. What intervention can be made by Bank of Indonesia to face globalization, or in a sense of globalization?
So I try to understand the questions correctly, because the question is about how we use the capital outflow.
How we use
Capital inflows.
how we use Bank of Indonesia to intervene the situation in order to respond to the globalization.
So the intervention of Bank of Indonesia in order to face globalization.
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yes.
All right.
So the Bank of Indonesia.
Sorry, I think I have to make it more clear. I think it is about how Bank Indonesia can use their authority in their authority dealing with other banks, let's say bank of BRI and others, dealing with the people in the field, let's say farmers like that. I'm thinking about Grameen Bank or some others like BRI in the previous time. So how because globalization is not, or ASEAN is not only war between currency, right? It is, let's say, war between human capital in the field, not only elite, not only middle class, but also lower class, right? So how can you, as Bank Indonesia, not only Pak Rizal, I think also Mas Umar,
Yes. How to help to regulate the banks to help the real sectors such as the agricultures or the manufacturers in Indonesia could be developed to face the globalization. I think that there are places like that. I think since the 1999, that Indonesia cannot give the, we call it the liquidity credit, that's the incentive for the give to banks so they can channel the funds to the priority sectors. Right now, the Indonesia cannot do it anymore. In shorter time, yes, we can do it, but it also has consequences. We know we have the palm plantations. Palm plantations.
Palm oil.
On the palm field. Just initiates funded in the early stage by the liquidity credit from Bank Indonesia. But this is the positive side. But the other side, some of the funds is not used to the directors, but used for the other business of the conglomerate enterprise. So why the government started since 1999 abolish the liquidity credit, because there is a negative impact of it. The negative impact also that it difficult for Bank Indonesia to manage the monetary variables. So it's difficult to bring down the inflation. It's the main objective of Bank Indonesia. Right now, Bank Indonesia, related to the banking sectors, we only involved in what we call it the macro-prudentials. So the macro-prudentials is the policies that the objective of the market is to maintain the stability of the financial systems. Because we believe by having the stability in financial systems and economic systems, the economy will be in the good shape. So all the economic agents can plan that they can use the opportunity to grow their business when the economic stables and the financial settles. So we use our main jobs.
Okay. Okay. Mas, I apologize, I cannot pass on your questions to Mr. Juoro because we're almost running out of time, but you can ask it later on the lunch break. The third question is from, sorry, what's your name? Mbak Aida from Birmingham, isn't it? Two of the biggest banks in Indonesia are not investment banks. Why investment banks do not grow in Indonesia? And the second question is, how can we face the middle income trap?
Yeah, in Indonesia, when you talk about investment bank, is they don't do a commercial, they don't take a deposit, under deposito. So investment bank, we used to have what we call Bapindo. It's not fully investment bank, but actually the idea is for the long-term infrastructure and so on. But in 1998, they bust, right? So then we have kind of like sort of like investment bank like Dana Rizal. But when you compare that, not to compare to JP Morgan, to kind of like a Credit Suisse, now really aggressive. Again, we talk about ASEAN. It's actually the Singaporean Malaysia. So it's like Maybank Group itself, now they acquired Kim Eng Securities. They acquired the GMT. Anyway, GMT is the founder and CEO is a ITB graduate too, Kusmayanto Kapriman. So he make a lot of money by selling this GMT to Maybank. So that's in the wealth management, which is okay to me. It's, but what really important now is, but I can kind of like answer a little bit what the second question. It's actually, it's a lot. I rather to kind of like, when you kind of like give opportunity, because Indonesia is still underdeveloped in the financial sector, especially in the banking. Remember, 70% of financing is coming from bank. So when they kind of like increase this kind of like for poor people through the branchless banking, I rather with the BI. Without we limit into the Bukum part. Because otherwise, that will be kind of like Indonesian bank that owned by Maybank, DBS, and so on.
Bukum part is the main 4 banks in Indonesia.
Yeah, that's an all Indonesian owned. It's Mandiri, BNI, BRI, BCA. So if they do that into this kind of like branchless, which is through the handphone or telco and the agent, then they prepare, and then the state bank is just kind of like this belong to Indonesia in place without kind of like discriminating it. After that, that kind of like be open to the Buku 3. So that's one way. And then we talk about Syariah. That's what's interesting about Malaysia. When we talk about Indonesia and Malaysia, we always quarrel. Even the chairman of Maybank, Pak Umar, what do you think if we are one country? I said, better no, we are separate. Even when I talk to my colleague, David Fortuna from Padang, we cannot separate from Indonesia, not about Indonesia. The Japanese would like kind of like ransack to us when you separate from Indonesia. You could imagine if you do kind of like Singapore, don't do think that way. But let's think that you are mainly Muslim, you are Malay, we are Malay. Can we do this? Yeah, that will exactly.